In a small monastery, nestled between the hills and clouds, there lived a young monk named Kaito, known by everyone as the kindest soul in the temple, always smiling, always helping, always available. From the day he arrived as a boy, Kaito believed that to be loved meant to be useful, and to be useful meant never saying no. He would wake before sunrise to sweep the temple floor, carry buckets of water uphill for the older monks, tend to the gardens, and listen patiently to the villagers who came with stories of suffering, heartbreak, or confusion. No matter how tired he was, no matter how much he wanted to rest, Kaito kept giving, because every time someone said, "You're so good," something in him felt worthy, if only for a moment. But over time, something changed. Though his hands moved through the chores and his lips still smiled, his heart began to feel heavy, like a bell that had been rung too many times. The joy that once came from service turned into quiet dread. His body ached, his sleep became thin, and he found himself flinching when someone called his name. Still, he kept going. Still, he kept saying yes, because he feared that if he stopped, if he said no just once, they would stop loving him. But one evening, as a cold rain poured down and the wind howled through the temple's wooden beams, Kaito collapsed by the river while trying to gather firewood. Not fainting, not unconscious, just broken inside. He sat in the mud, arms limp, eyes blurred with tears he didn't understand. And from the shadows, the head monk, Master Rinzin, stepped forward. He didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't offer comfort. He simply said, "Tomorrow morning, come to me before sunrise." The next day, Rinzin handed him a cracked wooden bucket and pointed to a clay bowl on a stand. "Fill this bowl with water from the well using this bucket," he said calmly. Kaito obeyed. He lowered the bucket, filled it, and began the walk to the bowl. But by the time he arrived, the water had leaked out. He tried again. Same result. Over and over, he filled the cracked bucket, only to return with it nearly empty. After hours of this, frustrated and exhausted, Kaito returned to Rinzin and said, "Master, the bucket is broken. It can't carry water. It's useless." Rinzin looked at him and smiled gently. "That bucket is you." Kaito froze. "You keep trying to give and give, but you're leaking. You're cracked from within. And yet you wonder why you always feel empty." Kaito looked down, embarrassed. "But isn't it selfish to stop helping?" Rinzin shook his head. "Not selfish, honest. Even rivers have banks. Even the moon has phases. The sun does not rise every moment. The idea that you must always say yes to be good is a lie that burns people from the inside out." Kaito sat silently, his breath unsteady. "But won't they stop liking me?" he whispered. Rinzin looked him in the eye. "Some will, but others will finally see the real you, not just the helper, not just the yes man, but the human being who breathes, rests, hurts, and heals." That evening, Kaito didn't join the group meditation. He sat alone, under a tree for the first time with no obligation to fix anything. The silence around him felt strange, like meeting himself again after a long absence. The next morning, when an older monk asked him to help carry wood, Kaito bowed respectfully and said, "Not today." His hands trembled. His heart raced. But nothing terrible happened. The monk simply nodded and asked someone else. That small no felt heavier than any burden he'd ever lifted. And yet, for the first time, he felt light. Over the next weeks, Kaito practiced boundaries the way he once practiced kindness, not as a wall to block people out, but as a way to hold himself together. He still helped, still cared, but he stopped abandoning himself to do it. He took walks alone. He took longer breaths. He didn't offer advice unless asked. He stopped carrying everyone's pain like a badge. And slowly, the cracks in his spirit began to close. He laughed again. He noticed the smell of tea. He looked in the mirror without guilt. He learned to sit beside others without solving them. He even taught the younger monk something Master Rinzin once whispered to him: "The bucket that leaks cannot fill others. First, it must be sealed." One day, a young visitor came to the temple overwhelmed with guilt because he couldn't say no to his family, his job, his friends. He felt like he was disappearing piece by piece. Kaito took him to the well, handed him the same old cracked bucket, and said, "Try to fill that bowl." When the boy returned with empty hands, Kaito simply said, "Now you understand." The boy cried, and Kaito cried with him, not because of sadness, but because he knew he wasn't alone in this lesson. Years later, when Master Rinzin passed away peacefully in his sleep, Kaito lit the incense, rang the temple bell, and stood before the monks, not as the temple's helper, but as its heart. A man who had learned that saying no with love was sometimes the greatest yes of all. And now, if you've ever felt tired from giving too much, if you've ever felt afraid to say no because you thought love was something you had to earn by being available, remember this: even the kindest souls need space to breathe. Even the most giving hearts deserve rest. You don't have to burn just to keep others warm. Let your no be soft, but let it be sacred. Because real peace doesn't come from doing everything for everyone. It comes from finally doing something kind for yourself. And if this story touched something in you, subscribe to this channel for more stories that help you remember who you are and remind you you are allowed to rest, to heal, and to say no without guilt.